Well, it is the off season, and the off season is a great time for idle thoughts. Thoughts like, what were the greatest home runs in the history of each franchise?
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. It's Sully Baseball on Blue Sky, Sully Baseball Podcast on the Instagrams. And today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Yeah, I like thinking about things like this, especially it's the off season. It's Christmas Eve for those of you who celebrate. It is Rickey Henderson's birthday eve for those of you who celebrate that. And you start thinking about things like, what are the greatest this? What are the greatest that's? And well, folks, today seems like as good a time as any to try to figure some of these things out. Today is as good a time as any to say, hey, what are the greatest home runs in the history of each franchise? Why not? And so that's what we're going to figure out today. And I'm going to make a caveat. I'm going to go through each franchise. And for those of you who are fans of each individual teams, if you disagree with me, let me know. But I've been compiling this one for a few weeks now, and I've been asking other fans of different teams to get their input on it. Now, these are the greatest home runs for the teams in their current incarnation. So I'm not going to have the greatest Brooklyn Dodgers home run, which will probably be either Duke Snider's home runs in the 1955 World Series or Jackie Robinson's home run off of Robin Roberts to force a playoff in 1951. The Braves, I'm not going to cover the Milwaukee Braves. Henry Aaron clinched the pennant in 1957 with a home run. Eddie Matthews had a walk-off in the 57 World Series. And I cover the Philadelphia A's or Jimmy Foxx hitting a go-ahead home run in the 1930 World Series. The Expos, as I'm sporting right here, their greatest home run was probably Gary Carter in the 1981 All-Star Game. And I'm not going to have Bobby Thompson's home run or Dusty Rhodes' home run or Mel Ott's home run in the 1933 World Series because those were for the New York Giants. These are for the fan bases that they currently play for. And, of course, there's a huge caveat of that because the A's don't play for anybody. They don't play for Oakland. They don't play for Sacramento. They're not allowed to say that. But I'm going to talk to them as if they are the Oakland A's because that's what they should be. And I'm going to do this for each one of the franchises. And we are going to start alphabetically in terms of the name of the team, which is why we are starting with the Angels, who would be in Anaheim. They claim they're in Los Angeles. They should be California. There are some potential ones when Mike Trout homered in the Skaggs, the no-hitter that was on Skaggs right after his death. And Trout hit the home run, and the combined no-hitter was a very dramatic moment. And Adam Kennedy hitting 3 home runs in the 2002 ALCS clincher was a huge, huge moment. But I think the greatest home run in Angels history has to be Scott Spezio's home run off of Rodriguez in the 2002 World Series that sparked the huge comeback. It was 5-0 Giants at the time with 2 outs and 2 strikes. He fouled off 7,863 pitches and then hit a 3-run home run just past the reach of Reggie Sanders. Now, Erstad homered to bring them to within 1, and Troy Glaus hit the go-ahead double, but Spezio's home run turned what looked like was going to be a Giants cakewalk into a Angels victory, which tied the series. That's my picks there. The Astros have a couple of big ones there. Chris Burke hit a walk-off home run to clinch the 2005 NLDS. That was a big one. So was Billy Hatcher's game-tying home run in the 86 National League Championship Series against the Mets. That's going to be part of a series I'm doing of the greatest moments for teams that lost the postseason series. Normally, I would put Jose Altuve's walk-off home run against Aroldis Chapman, but the mystery of the buzzer hangs over that, which means I think the greatest home run in Astros history is Yordan Alvarez turning the World Series upside down in 2022 to put the Astros ahead against Philadelphia in that Game 6 that turned into the clincher. Heading over to the other A's team, the A's. I have a couple of ones on there that are great ones for the history of the Oakland A's, but I narrowed it down to a couple. And mind you, in some of these, they're going to talk about, I'll have to say, multiple home runs in the greatest home run. Sometimes they're a combo deal, and I'll explain why in a bit. And an example is here. The first one I have here is Jose Canseco's fourth deck shot in Toronto. That, yes, was juiced up, but what a shot. Then that ALCS game in 1989. Yikes, what a home run. I have Gene Tennis's 2 home runs in Game 1 of the 72 World Series. Remember, that was the first time the A's had been in the World Series since they were the 1931 Philadelphia A's. And they were not given much of a shot at all to win the 72 World Series against the Reds, especially because Reggie Jackson was hurt. And Gene Tennis homered in his first and second at bat. He would wind up homering 4 times in the World Series to become the World Series MVP, and the A's won their first title in Oakland. But it's funny, when I talked to a lot of A's fans, and Lord knows I did while hosting Locked On A's this year, I brought this concept up for this show, and it was almost unanimous. Scott Hatteberg's walk-off home run for the 20th straight win, not just because the dude from Guardians of the Galaxy did it in the movie, but because it just was such a bizarre game where they had the huge lead. They coughed up the lead. Up steps Hatteberg, the walk-off home run, 20 games in a row. When I was talking to A's fans, especially when I was there for the final game in Oakland, so many fans were saying that was their favorite A's memory altogether, which is interesting. Going to the Blue Jays, Edwin Encarnacion walking off the 2016 Orioles in the wild card game while Zach Britton was reading Bazooka Joe comics in the bullpen is on that list, as is Jose Bautista's bat flip. I do not think that bat ever landed in that wild game in the playoffs against the 2015 Rangers. But, it has to be Joe Carter. And it's funny, Tom Cheek, who's the radio announcer for the Blue Jays, said when Joe Carter hit the walk-off home run to clinch the 1993 World Series, he said, "Touch them all, Joe. You'll never hit a bigger home run in your life." How did he know that? He turned out to be true, but what if Joe hit a bigger one? I'm just saying. We go to the Braves, and once again, these are purely Atlanta Braves home runs. And I do have Jorge Soler's, all the home runs he hit in the 2021 World Series, and the big one early in the clinching game that really put the Astros and their fans back on their heels has to be up there, that led to his eventual being named the World Series MVP. There are a lot of great Atlanta Braves home runs, but I'm going to say David Justice's home run in the clinching game of the 1995 World Series is high up there as well. Remember, Dave Justice kind of gave some guff back to Atlanta fans to show a little bit of enthusiasm when they returned back, and he came back, hit the home run, which in a 1-0 clinching game, Tom Glavine pitched a masterpiece. It's one thing to talk trash. It's another thing to back it up, and that's what David Justice did. But for the greatest home run in Atlanta Brave history, I mean, is there even a question? It's Henry Aaron passing Babe Ruth in April of 1974. That has to be listed amongst the greatest home runs in the history of baseball, for not just the drama of it, but also the social significance of it, the record-breakingness of it, and the fact that Henry Aaron finished the previous season 1 home run shy of the record, and he came back and made quick work of it. That's a pretty easy one. The Brewers, this was an interesting one because there weren't a lot of sort of iconic home runs in Brewers history. And if you're a Brewers fan and you're listening to me, you may disagree with some of the ones. I have Ryan Braun homering to seal their 2008 wild card berth deep in the season, which basically, remember, the Brewers had not been in the playoffs since 1982, and they hadn't really been a contender since 1992. And Braun's home run in the arm of CeCe Sabathia put him into the playoffs in 08. when the Brewers went on that great run to begin the 1987 season, a big part of it was the wild Easter Sunday game where Rob Deere hit the big home run and the walk-off shot by Dale Swaim, which had to be one of the wildest and most memorable home runs in the history of the Milwaukee Brewers. But I have the top one being Robin Yount's home run the final weekend of the series against the Baltimore Orioles to clinch the AL East and giving the Brewers their first American League East title, their first trip to the playoffs, and the first time Milwaukee had a postseason of any kind since the 1958 World Series when the Braves were there. So I have Yount's home run to clinch the division in 82. But if you disagree with me on that one, this is a one that I'd like to, I'm game for hearing another one. Now, one of the most storied franchises in baseball has to be the St. Louis Cardinals. And there were a lot of choices on there. Scott Rowland's home run off of Roger Clemens was a big one. The Tom Lawless bat flip in the 87 World Series was one, as was Jose Oquendo's home run in the National League Championship Series of 1987. That just a dagger in the heart of San Francisco Giant fans. These were all good ones to go by. I did narrow it down to three. And this is one where you almost have to combine two from two games. Ozzie Smith, the walk-off home run against Tom Niedenfuer, go crazy, folks, go crazy. They give the Cardinals a walk-off victory in Game 5, which set up the Jack Clark home run with 2 outs in the 9th inning to give the Cardinals the lead in Game 6 that turned into the clincher, both against Tom Niedenfuer. I kind of combined those two because they complement each other and they're in the same series. I have Mark McGwire passing Roger Maris. Now, I talked about this last week, how Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire saved the game of baseball. You may not like how they saved the game of baseball, but they did. And that home run, even if it was a little fake, that was a great moment. And I'm going to give the greatest one to the David Freese home run to clinch Game 6 of the 2011 World Series, one of the greatest games I ever saw. And Freese, who tied the game with a 2-out, 2-run triple in the bottom of the 9th to save the World Series for the Cardinals and then walk it off a couple innings later, you got to give Freese his due. So those were the biggest home runs in my take for the Angels, Astros, A's, Blue Jays, Braves, Brewers, and Cardinals. We're going to move on to the Cubs and D-backs. And yes, a big one is coming up for the Dodgers, including one that didn't take place a long time ago. In fact, it took place just a few months ago. Hey, let's hear from our friends over at Game Time. You know, I use Game Time. I use Game Time to get tickets for the National League Championship Series where I saw the Dodgers clinch against the Mets, and it's a terrific app to use. Game Time is focused on togetherness this holiday season, and that means when you bring people together at live events, the experience is that much better, and it's the perfect gift. Game Time is a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks helps the curation easier if you want to save more on sports, comedy, theater, concerts, and more. And you get seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and the lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. You can't beat that. And the ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? I'll tell you what time it is. It's game time. All right, let's continue our trek down the memory lane of the greatest home runs for each franchise. Where did I leave off? I left it off somewhere over here. Oh, here it is. my screen is an absolute mess right now. The Diamondbacks. This one was interesting because the Diamondbacks have a World Series championship, and it is a all-time great World Series championship, but there wasn't really an iconic home run from that run. Oh, let me take the Game Time banner off there. There you go. The first one I picked out was one from 2011, and it was Ryan Roberts in a game where the Dodgers were beating the Diamondbacks by 5 with only 3 outs to go in extra innings. And the Diamondbacks went on a wild rally, and with 2 outs and 2 strikes, and the Diamondbacks still trailing 6-3, Ryan Roberts hit a walk-off grand slam. And this was in late September with the Diamondbacks basically trying to clinch the National League West and trying to clinch home field advantage. And the home run by Ryan Roberts gave the Diamondbacks a stunning victory. And along the way, the manager was Kirk Gibson, and he mimicked Kirk Gibson's home run fist pump there. Another one, which was a playoff run for the Diamondbacks in 2007, and they were playing the Chicago Cubs. Cubs had a lead. Ted Lilly was on the mound, and Chris Young launched a 3-run home run to give the Diamondbacks the lead in Game 2 of the National League Division Series. The most memorable thing of that home run, other than the fact it was a go-ahead home run by Chris Young, was Ted Lilly's reaction to it when he saw it was gone with 2 strikes, and he picked up his glove and he threw it on the ground. But I think the biggest home run in Diamondbacks history took place, well, in 2023 in the League Championship Series between Philadelphia and the Diamondbacks, a series where everybody thought, the first 2 games, it looked like the Diamondbacks were in the just happy to be there territory. And with the Philadelphia Phillies taking a significant lead in Game 4, it looked like they were about to take a 3-0 lead and put themselves in a position to clinch the pennant the next day. And with the score, after an Alex Bohm single, it was 5-2 going into the 7th, and it was 5-3 going to the 8th. And Alec Thomas hit a 2-run game-tying home run off of Craig Kimbrell to absolutely stun the Phillies. And the Diamondbacks would go on to rally, win the game, and ultimately go on to win the pennant. And I think that's the greatest home run in Diamondbacks history. If you disagree with me, let me know. All right, the Dodgers. There's a lot of ones for the Dodgers, clearly. And I think I have to pick 3 home runs based on how dramatic they were and how one just created a dagger in the heart for a franchise that I'm currently representing. I'm going to have to put number 3, Rick Monday. His home run in the 9th inning off of Steve Rogers in one of the wildest NLCSs you can imagine gave the Dodgers the lead going to the 9th inning as they eliminated the Montreal Expos in their only trip to the postseason. The Expos may have won the World Series that year if they had gotten all the way. And Monday's home run gave the Dodgers the lead, sending them eventually to the World Series. Freddie Freeman has to be there. There's one walk-off grand slam in the history of the World Series, and Freddie Freeman hit it. And he hit it with 2 outs and his team losing. And think of how different the World Series would have been if the Yankees won Game 1. If the Yankees won Game 1, they would have taken home field advantage, knowing the Dodgers were going to throw one bullpen game. The Yankees wound up winning that bullpen game. If everything else worked out in those first 4 games, even if you threw in the Yankees blowing a 5-0 lead, they would have been sending this series back to Los Angeles with the Dodgers pitching staff an absolute mess. So much changed with a Game 1 victory with that home run. It set the tone for the rest of the World Series. It's one of the most dramatic World Series home runs we ever saw. And it's probably the second most dramatic Game 1 home run we'll ever see in our lives. And why is it the second? Because Kirk Gibson. It has to be Kirk Gibson. Kirk Gibson's is the greatest home run in Los Angeles Dodgers history, and Dodgers is one of the greatest home runs in the history of baseball. And yeah, you just have to put them on. It's absolutely a no-brainer that that's the Kirk Gibson home run. And which leads us to the Giants. The San Francisco Giants, mind you. I have Travis Ishikawa's walk-off home run to clinch the 2014 pennant. That's got to be up there. As is Pablo Sandoval's 3 home runs against Verlander and a reliever from the Tigers, as the Giants were not supposed to win that game. That was the great Verlander versus Barry Zito. You think the Giants are winning that game? No way they're winning that game. Pablo Sandoval said, "Hold my beer," and he looked at his belly. He had one, and that's got to be that's going to be the second great home run performance in Giants history. And then you have to have Bonds. I mean, you may not like it, but he passed Aaron. You may not like how he did it, but I have him there. If you think I'm wrong, you want to put a Bays one on there, we want to put a McCovey one on there, you want to put Will Clark off of Greg Maddux, there's a bunch of them. But I'm going to pick Bonds 756. Now, the Cleveland Guardians, or let's face it, these are all Indians home runs. I have Tony Pena walking off the first Cleveland playoff game in years in his extra inning shot against Zane Smith and the Red Sox. Speaking of winning against the Red Sox, Ken Keltner hit the huge home run in the 1948 American League playoff game between the Indians and the Red Sox to help lead the Indians to their last World Series title. But I think I have the greatest one being Tony Fernandez's home run in the 1997 American League Championship Series in extra innings that sent the Tribe to the World Series. Moving on to the Seattle Mariners. I have Edgar Martinez's grand slam against John Wetland that absolutely crushed any hopes of the Yankees winning that in 4. And I have Cal Raleigh's home run that sent the Mariners back to the playoffs in 2022 at the number 2 spot. But this is one where you have to combine 2 home runs for one memory. The greatest home run moment in Seattle history, and it's tough to argue against this, is Ken Griffey Sr. and Ken Griffey Jr. going back to back. And now we're going to the Mets. And when we come back, we're going to talk long and hard about the Mets and the fact that they also have one of the great home runs in the history of baseball, and a home run that is, quite frankly, one of the great regular season home runs in baseball history. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Let me tell you something. This is a time when everyone gets into it, and I love to pick up a W, and, I bet on these games as they're going on. And guess what, folks? You do it so easily on FanDuel. It's all on one page. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Now, just so you know, we're going to pick this up in a couple of days. We're going to have our Christmas episode, and then there are a bunch of other ones and a lot of home runs to go through. And we're not going to squeeze this all into one episode. But I do want to end with the Mets, because the Mets also had one of the great home runs in regular season history. And let me tell you something, there were a bunch of Met ones I had to shimmy through. You have a walk-off home run by Benny Agbayani in the 2000 playoffs. You had Todd Pratt hitting his home run to clinch the division series in 1999. You had Robin Ventura's walk-off grand slam single. You had Al Weiss's home run and Don Clendenin's home run in the 1969 World Series. But I think these three are the one. You had Lenny Dykstra hitting the walk-off come-from-behind home run off of Dave Smith and the Astros in that incredible series, and in the 1986 NLCS. Tremendously dramatic moment, and just showed how that team had this electric sense of, not being stopped. This year, this is my second 2024 one, but you got to put Pete Alonso and his home run with the Mets on the verge of elimination, hitting the 3-run home run and sinking the Milwaukee Brewers and sending the Mets to within 2 games of the World Series. That has to be on there. But there's no controversy. If there's a controversy about this, then I don't get it. And it has to be Mike Piazza. Mike Piazza's post 9/11 home run. The first game back from September 11th was such an emotional moment, such a special moment in baseball history and American history. It was the Mets down facing their arch rival Braves, and there was so much tension. I was living in New York at the time. We were all wondering what was going to happen in that game. And there was such a moment of catharsis, the first moment we've had in weeks to feel happy. And if you were a Braves fan, you couldn't help but feel a little happy. In fact, it was Piazza, who was the biggest star on the Mets, the most beloved member on that Met team. It was the first game back, and he hit that massive home run. Hell, they mentioned that home run on his Hall of Fame plaque. And all the other home runs, Alonso, Dykstra, Weiss, Ventura, Pratt, Strawberry, hitting the ball practically out of the stadium in Montreal. All these great home runs in Mets history. Willie Mays hitting a home run his first day as a Met against the Giants on the day I was born. That should be up there too, but it's got to be Piazza. Well, there are a bunch of other teams, and we're going to cover this next week because we're going to cover the biggest in Nationals, Orioles, Padres, Phillies, Pirates, Rangers, Rays, Reds, Red Sox, Rockies, Royals, Tigers, Twins, White Sox, and the Yankees. And there's some good ones. And if you disagree with me, let me know. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now, and on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball and Blue Sky, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Have a great Christmas Eve. Next week, we'll give you the second half of these. This has been Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.